Today, we're going to peel back the layers of a history that truly shaped the world. It's a story about a global economic system, yes, but it's also a story of incredible human suffering. And, most importantly, unbreakable human resilience. We're going to see how it was all built and how people fought back every single step of the way.
So, let me ask you a question. And it might sound a little strange. Can a bowl of rice hold a secret? I mean, really think about it. Because what if I told you that something so simple, so everyday, could tell an incredible story? A story about brilliant people, their amazing skills, and a history that carried with them across oceans.
Okay, so here's our game plan. We've got 4 main parts to cover to really get the whole picture. First, we'll look at the massive economic machine that started it all. Then, we'll dig into the brutal system it created. After that, we'll explore the amazing culture that survived against all odds. And finally, we'll talk about the constant, powerful fight for freedom.
All right, let's dive into Section 1. You see, to really understand why the transatlantic slave trade went on for so long, you have to look at it for what it was. It was a business, a giant global business, designed from the ground up for one thing and one thing only, to make a lot of money.
And the scale, it is just hard to wrap your head around. We are talking about 10 to 12 million people. This was the largest forced movement of human beings ever in all of history, all to fuel this new economy that connected Europe, Africa, and the Americas.
So why? What created this massive demand for labor? Well, it all started with an economic idea called mercantilism. The game plan was pretty simple. You go set up colonies, you take all their valuable stuff, like sugar, cotton, and tobacco, and you do it all as cheaply as possible. And what's the biggest cost in any business? Labor. The cruel answer they came up with was to find labor they didn't have to pay.
And this demand created this terrifyingly efficient cycle. You've probably heard of it, the triangle trade. Okay, so step 1, ships leave Europe full of manufactured goods. Step 2, those goods are traded in Africa for human beings who are then forced onto ships for the horrible Middle Passage. Step 3, in the Americas, their labor produces raw materials which are then shipped back to Europe for huge profits that funded the very next trip. It was a perfect and absolute brutal loop.
Now, in Africa, European traders took advantage of existing rivalries, and it created a really tragic situation. This quote here says it all. Once one kingdom got guns from Europeans, its neighbors desperately needed guns to defend themselves. It was a trap. The only way to get guns to protect your people was to trade other people for them. It started a horrible arms race where human beings became the currency.
So that's the economic engine. Now let's move on. Let's look at how this business was built on a legal system specifically designed to turn people into property.
The numbers from the Middle Passage are just chilling. Imagine this. Each person was given only 4 square feet of space. 4. It's no surprise then that on average, 20%, that's 1 out of every 5 people, didn't survive the journey. It was a cold, hard calculation of profit over human life.
This quote from someone who actually saw it makes the reality crystal clear. They had not so much room as a man in his coffin. Just let that sink in. It was basically a state of being buried alive.
And the end of this journey was a very specific system called chattel slavery. Now that word chattel, it's related to the word cattle. And that's exactly what it meant. A human being was legally defined as a piece of property, like a farm animal, something that could be bought, sold, and passed down to your kids, completely cut off from their family, their home, and their entire history.
Now, this system didn't just happen. It was built, on purpose, law by law. In 1640, you have the John Punch case, which made a clear line connecting race to lifelong punishment. But 1662, that was a huge turning point. A new law said that a child's freedom was determined by their mother's status. And just like that, slavery became permanent and hereditary. It was passed down from mother to child.
The work itself was just unbelievably dangerous. Take the sugar plantations in Brazil, some of the most brutal places on earth. The average life expectancy for an enslaved person there was just 23 years old. The system wasn't just cruel, it was lethal. It literally ate people's lives for profit.
But, and this is a really important but, that is not the whole story, not even close. This brings us to a powerful counterstory. It's about what people carried inside them. This section is all about their knowledge, their skills, and a culture that refused to be broken.
You see, long before Europeans arrived, West Africans were master rice farmers. And I'm not talking about just a few years of experience.
We're talking about expertise going back to at least 300 AD, maybe even earlier. They were agricultural engineers who understood the land and water in a way few others did.
So how would they do it? Well, you can think of it like they built a water park for plants. It was brilliant. They engineered these super sophisticated irrigation systems in really difficult swampy areas. They'd build these massive walls to keep the salty ocean water out, then they'd dig these intricate canals to bring fresh river water in, and they'd use special gates to control the flow perfectly so the rice got just the right amount to drink. It was pure genius.
And this incredible knowledge wasn't written in books, it was carried in the minds of the people who were brought to America. On the isolated sea islands off the coast of South Carolina and Georgia, they formed what we now know as the Gullah Geechee community. Here, they wove together traditions from many different West African groups. They made beautiful baskets, created a new language, a kind of secret code mixing African words with English, and kept their history alive through storytelling. When the entire system was designed to erase who you were, keeping your culture alive was a massive act of defiance.
And that deep-seated resilience, well, it naturally turned into a constant fight for freedom. So for our final section, we're going to look at that struggle, a struggle that took place in ways both big and small, loud and quiet.
Resistance wasn't always a dramatic battle. A lot of the time, it was more like an everyday quiet war. Enslavers demanded you work fast, so you work slowly. They demanded you follow every rule, so you'd accidentally break a tool. They demanded you never leave, so you'd sneak out at night to visit family on another plantation. Each one was a small, clever way of taking back a little bit of your own time, your own humanity.
But sometimes, that quiet war exploded into open rebellion. The stage was set in 1733. Spanish-controlled Florida made this incredible promise. Any enslaved person who could escape and make it to their territory would be free. That promise lit a fire of hope. And in 1739, a man named Jimmy led a group in South Carolina on a bold march south, heading for that promise of freedom.
And they made their goal perfectly, absolutely clear. As they marched, they carried a banner. On it was just one word: liberty. There was no mistaking what they were fighting for. They were risking everything for that one idea.
Now, the rebellion was eventually crushed, but it absolutely terrified the colonists, and the response was fear. They created a new, much harsher set of laws called the Slave Codes. Each rule was designed to stop another rebellion before it could ever start. It became illegal to learn to read and write to stop the spread of ideas. It was illegal to gather in groups to stop any planning. It was even illegal to own drums because they feared they could be used to send secret messages.
But the fight for freedom continued, even in the courtroom. The Amistad case is an amazing example. In 1839, a group of captured Africans took control of the ship they were on. What came next was a huge legal battle that went through court after court, all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. And in a historic decision, the court agreed they were free people who had been kidnapped illegally, and that they had every right to fight for their freedom.
So we've seen this enormous, brutal system built for profit, and we've seen the incredible human spirit that refused to be broken by it. And that leaves us with one final big question to think about. How do the echoes of this system, and the powerful spirit that fought against it, continue to shape the world that we all live in today?